2023 Pokemon TCG World Champion!
What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are following up with episode 2 on our How to Play series. Today's docket, we've got Fusion Mew VMAX. So why Mew VMAX? So if you've watched the clip in the beginning there, Mew VMAX is now our Masters World Champion for 2023. Very, very strong archetype. Finally did it. Didn't expect to get it there, but it took down the whole World Championships. There was 2 of them in the top 4 and a handful of them in top 8. So Mew was a very powerful deck. We're heading into a new format though. So Mew VMAX, it's a few things. So before we jump to the new format, let's take a look at the winning list. Huge shouts to Vance Kelly. This is the deck he piloted. We took the 60 right off of Limitless. I'll post the link down below if you want to see where it went. I don't think they break down matchups. But we have the 60 here, so we've got our pretty standard stuff. They put in the Oricorio for what I believe would be mirror matches or anything trying to hit very particular numbers. So that is good there. 3 Forest Stone. Box of Disaster was by far the coolest card I saw in this list. So if you knock out a Pokemon at full Pokemon at full health, you take 8 damage in return. So it's good in the Gardevoir matchups. It's good in anything that's really going for that big KO, so then we can respond a little easier. I do like that. Crystal Cave, heal up some damage if Lost Mine's trying to set you up, or Cresselia, anything like that. Totally get that. Everything else is pretty much standard stuff. Where do we go? What's next? So Obsidian Flames is right around the corner. If you're playing online, we already have access to the cards. If you're looking for the cards in IRL play, it starts, I believe it's August 24th or 25th. Roughly 2 weeks after the sets drop, so then the Switch is there. What big decks do we really have to adjust for? Of course, we've got the King. The only deck that you really need to be aware of is Charizard EX. And I've got some bad news. Mew hates this deck. So if this deck gets online, it does not like it. But other than that, Obsidian Flames is mostly an unchanged format, aside from Charizard entering the fray, kind of similarly to how Chien Pao kind of forced its way into the meta. Some other decks do get some tweaking with the Pidgeot and whatnot. But for the most part, it's pretty much Charizard plus all of your old friends from Paldea evolved, and I think that's very interesting. So it was a good time to cover. The Team Fusion Strike, if you will, your best attackers. Somebody mentioned a Selgor, the grass-type Pokemon. It does more damage if it switches from the bench to the active. As a direct answer to Charizard, that's a stage 1 line read. First up, Lodius Echo. So 70 damage for each Fusion Strike energy you have in play. 280 cap before Power Tablets, before Choice Belt. We do have Elesa Sparkle to get this Pokemon into play and get it all going. Mew VMAX will copy this attack more times than not. Eiscue. So Spiritomb is going to see an uptick in play. Anytime something wins a big event, they're going to try to counter it hard. So Spiritomb, Path to the Peak, you name it. Having the access to Block Slider, I enjoy in the deck whether they're playing Spiritomb or not. Doing 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each Fusion Strike energy in play. Going first, we just kind of patiently set up. Going second, Eiscue can allow us to knock out the Spiritomb if they bench it early with no Manaphy. Some decks don't even play Manaphy. So Eiscue can allow us to deal with that, and then all of a sudden their 1 counter is gone. Deoxys. I've had a few people pitch it. I can respect it because it's a 120 body, but you have to commit the penny package as well. So Photon Boost does 80 plus 80 more if there's any Fusion Strike energy attached to it. So 140 on the first turn, 160 in most turns. It's another attack for Mew to copy, another 1 prize body. Again, respect it if you decide to opt for it. Not always necessary. Genesect, Techno Blast 9 times out of 10 is the best attack you're going to be copying in the deck, by far. 210, just can't attack the next turn. Mew has free retreats, that's not really a problem. And of course, Psychic Leap, just a reset depending on where your board is. It helps get damaged Pokemon out of the way. Sometimes it helps get your only VMAX out of the way so they can't just immediately go 3 prizes, 3 prizes. It's nice in that regard. So this is Team Fusion Strike. These are the homies helping Mew stay in the game. Almost 2 years later, I don't think it's going anywhere. It is a good deck to buy. It was part of the Fusion Strike product last year, which I picked up 3 of them, and I still recommend you picking up 2 of them if you haven't, because Mew is just such a good deck. The counters didn't kill it. Charizard's going to try, but the counters haven't killed it yet. So here's the skeleton. So we took Vance's winning list because he really, really knocked it out of the park. We chopped it down to about 54 cards, as you can see on screen here. 1 Mew is optional. Oricorio, again, is an optional tech for a particular matchup. Choice Belt is an optional matchup. I do expect to see more EX Pokemon as well, so I'm not entirely sure if I want the second one. But this is the 54 skeleton. I would take this and then start brainstorming off that where you want to go. It's already shown us the winning formula. We just have to refine it to our own play style, what we're expecting. Now, what do I recommend? What am I going to be rambling on about for the next 10, 15 minutes? This one here, this is my suggestion. Take it with a grain of salt, do what you will. I decided to run a few tech Pokemon and of course some tech cards and some preference style. I added back the 4th Mew V. I love having that free pivot. That's just a personal thing. Psychic Leap is also a very important attack, so I like having an excess of Mew. We'll discard 1 or 2 of them. Ice Cube. Spiritomb is good, but at the same time, block slidering off those evolving Pokemons, Charmanders, Raltses, Spiritombs, you name it, heck, even Frigibacks. Great. Meloetta Echo is too good. This deck was considered ban-worthy at one point because of this card. Oricorio on the fence right now. I've opted for a 2nd copy of Iono and a 2nd copy of Judge. So the way I'm going to tackle this deck, if you notice, there are 2 paths in the picture. I would even go as high as 3. So 3 path, 1 Lost City. This deck is going to have to function properly under Path to the Peak. Everything else, we want to have additional draw supporters. They're going to be trying to tech for us. They don't realize how dominant Charizard is against us, but they're still going to try to tech for us. So this is it. I did cut a Cram-o-matic because I would rather have a guaranteed card in a 4-seal stone than a Cram. So this is the list. This is the 60. I will break down the matchups in a second. Again, this is the one I've been loving. I've been playing game after game after some matchup overview for how to play against the 10 most popular decks, including Charizard EX. Gonna get the worst one out of the way by far is Charizard EX. So Charizard is a new powerhouse. It is a dark Pokemon. It hits us for weakness for just 2 energy. It's really, really disgusting. Its ability is a pain in the behind. They really just have to set up 1 Charizard, and then we have to figure out how to deal with that. In that one, we are trying to deny them the Charizard EX as long as possible. So the extra copies of Iono, the extra copies of Judge, trying to go first, obviously, we want the evolution. We're going to spam the hell out of Judge, Iono, Path. We are only going to remove the Path if we feel like we need it. We're going to try to use Ice Cube to block Slider and constantly pick them off. If you put Lost City into play, it's bait. Don't do that. It's very tough. The Arceus they'll put on the board, that is also bait. The Charmanders are what's going to hurt you. As soon as you take 1 prize, the Charizard EX knocks out everything on your board with or without weakness. So it doesn't matter. We want to be trying to pick off those tiny little lizards and make it as hard as possible for them to find the stage 2, path bump, and rare candy all in the same go. So I really like heavy path counts in that matchup. If you're worried about that matchup, and you should be worried about that matchup because it's about a 20% share, I do think it's very, very good. So it's probably the best archetype that we've seen out of Scarlet and Violet aside from Gardevoir. That's how you deal with that one. Once they get that first Charizard into play, I really don't have an answer for you. You can path and pray, but they're just going to keep bopping you again and again. So maybe feed them the Mew VMAX, they'll take the 3. Iono, and then if you can follow up with the Meloetta to get it off the board. But if they get 2 Charizard, it's GG's. Know your bad matchup. I think that's going to be the worst matchup. Bar none. Take out the Charmander, mess with their hand, don't fall for the bait, the 2 prizers. Those are prizes we'll get at the end game. Kind of have to 2-shot a Charizard EX because it is very, very tough to get all 4 tablets, Path, and the Judge, and to make sure they don't respond on it. So people have pitched the Escape, but I really do not like the idea of putting a stage 1 into this deck. So if somebody, big brains it in the technology, keep an eye out for that. That's Charizard out of the way. Gardevoir. Okay. So this one here, if you can't tell, I have a pretty familiar strategy for a few of them. So Gardevoir, it's trying to set up its Curlias, it's trying to set up its Ralts. This one I really do like Ice Cube because I can see Gardevoir also slotting in Spiritomb. Sometimes they'll develop the Manaphy, sometimes not. If they don't develop the Manaphy, then we're going to try to use Ice Cube to pummel their Ralts early. We will throw Path Play every single turn because it takes away their Radiant Greninja, it takes away their Roar of the Sword, and constantly ripping down their hand. We're forcing them to bench Spiritomb and Manaphy, and they're probably going to have Cresselia in play. So then they only have 3 Ralts, and at that point, we're either going to try to boss them, or we're going to try to keep disrupting them so they never really build themselves into the game. When they build themselves into the game with the Gardevoir EX, EX is nice, fine and dandy. That's not what's going to hurt us. What's going to hurt us is everything else. So if they have a Curlia that hasn't evolved into Shining Arcana, take that out. If they have Cresselia, he can be a bit annoying. Don't bench your Oricorio, don't bench your Meloetta in this matchup unless you're ready to use them in the moment to go for the big EX KO. Again, we're trying to disrupt them because they are a stage 2 deck similar to Charizard, and they're doing everything they can to just get into the game. So Mew has the speed, Mew has the disruption. Mew's not afraid of the path, it was merely raised in it. It was one of those rare decks that can operate in and out of path as long as you're looking for your sequencing and you have your draw supporters at the right time. So that's the one I would recommend. Gardevoir can be iffy. I do expect them to try to slot Skystone back in with the new town store, so just be wary of that. Save your vacuums if you have to. Hell, even go to a 4 path to the peak and an extra Lost Vacuum if you need to. That one I think could be very cool. And then we just play an entire, we'll take the DTE elements and just play with Fusion. So that's really cool. I like that. Slapping path down turn 1 is really disgusting. So just be wary of that. Don't put 2 VMAXs into play either until you have to. Do you see 2 VMAXs on the screen? Absolutely. But again, we're learning the matchups. Or if I know I have a stranglehold on the board state, I will do it. But Gardevoir will always come back, so don't do that versus Gardevoir. That one's a little favored to us, I think, because of the issues, but that's the safe one. Next one up, Chien Pao Baxcalibur. So this is one of those rare decks that can actually one-shot you, similar to Gardevoir, similar to Charizard. It is a stage 2 deck, and we're going to really prey on that. So they're relying on Iridas more than Ionos. So if the Irida doesn't get them enough value, they're going to struggle. So if we go first, and you do want to go first against majority of these matchups, only because the evolutionary advantage is too strong to ignore, we are going to try to pick off their Friggy Backs. The Chien Pao can only respond if there's a Baxcalibur in play the following turn. So if we're constantly picking off their Friggy Backs with the Eiscue, then it's not a problem. They're going to eventually set up for a big KO with the Mew, and that's where the Iono and the Path come into play. And then we can knock out their Chien Pao, and if they have the 2 or the 3 cards, it's very tough to dig out of. They have been adopting Arceus and Pidgeot, which lets them search for cards. But Path to the Peak shuts both of those down, so a 3-card brick might be all you need. You're looking for an opportunity where their deck not thin enough that when you slap those disruption cards down, they just don't get anything from it. They will definitely get a one-shot KO. Just pace yourself for that. Be wary of that. You want to outspeed them. Mew's entire game plan is pretty much how aggressively can we get in the early stages before you're on and rolling. Because if they're on a 35-card deck and they just knock out a Mew VMAX, those Ionos are going to hurt. Those Judges are going to hurt. I've even considered Echoing Horn there, so that way you can just go Chien Pao, Chien Pao, Chien Pao, knock out all 3 of them. Who is the next one? Okay, Mirror Match. Still want to go first, but you have to know what to do in case you go seconds. I lose the coin flip rather often. Typically, we'll still try to push for a Melodious Echo or develop 2 one-prize Pokemon, whether you go first or second. And the reason is, yes, it makes your prize map weird, but if they want to Escape Rope Elesa Sparkle, try to go for a turn 1, 2/10 Melodious Echo, it is very possible. You can very much sneak up on an opponent that's not expecting it, so you get the first 2 prizes. And then you'll have 2 to 3 Mew develop. Your next plan is you're trying to boss up a Genesect, and then you're trying to boss up a Genesect. So you run the 2-2-2 matchup. They will eventually try to catch up and take out a Mew VMAX. That's okay. They have to burn a handful of tablets and the choice belt. If they're doing that, sometimes they play a little loosey-goosey with the resources. They might over-discard the bosses, the Pal Pad. They might even Cram-o-matic the Pal Pad. And then because we play the extra lines of supporters and heavier counts of path than they do, it makes them tough to respond for a second one because they've got the 3. And then they're trying to dig. So I do like that one. Again, it's very coin flip match. You flip your heads, the game is nuts. If you flip 2 to 3 to 4 Cram-o-matic heads, the game is pretty much yours almost unless you botch everything. So it is a very coin flip heavy matchup. I can't really give much more advice than that. Oricorio could be a nice include to kind of skew their math even by 10 or 20 points, which is also good. Psychic Leap, you can Psychic Leap a 1-prizer to take all your 3-prizers off the board. So if they knock out a 3-prizer and you Psychic Leap and take out theirs, so then you've taken 4 prizes, they can't win the game in that sense, and then you just have to redevelop a Mew, which isn't that bad. You can believe that. So Fusion Mew, it's he who wins the coin flips wins the game, unfortunately. Now we're going to talk about all the ARC variants that survive. I think the strongest ARC variant going forward will be a counter box. So this is the Umbreon, the Flying Pika, you name it. That's probably one of the stronger ones. Arc Giratina is the other one, but they all function the same. They all want to either attach Pass going first, or they want to attach Trinity Charge, set up their backup attacker, and ideally they're going to have a Dark attacker for you. So we want to deal with that, or we want to deal with the Arceus. So we're going to slap down our Path to the Peak every single time, usually towards the end of the turn, so we can play all our Genesects. We're going to establish a wide board. We are going to set up, going first, we can play a little more conservatively, slap our Path. If we have our 4-Seal Stone, that is terrific. We can use the 4-Seal Stone to remove the Path at a later date, which is kind of why I keep at least 1 copy of Lost City in my deck. Bump it, Genesect, keep going. Deal with the Arceus. If they do set up Umbreon, you do have to be careful of that. I don't think Umbreon is a strong target going forward. They'll be too busy trying to deal with the Charizard or staying consistent with the Giratina damage. Giratina is always removing energy off the board, so if you can figure out what has energy on it and try to deal with that, sometimes they just can't respond. So if Giratina has 3 energy on it and it decides to remove 2 off itself and there's nothing else on the board, take out the Giratina. If Giratina has no energy on it, but the energy is all on an Arceus or something, deal with that. It's wherever the energy goes determines where your KOs are. They need the Choice Belt and they need the 3 energy to hit you. And if you're playing Oricorio, they're not going to get the clean one shot, so we do have a little bit of time. So we can take a KO, they can hit into us, be 10 to 20 damage shy. Then we can boss up the Squovit or boss up an undeveloped Bidoof and Psychic Leap back into the deck. And all of a sudden we've taken 3 prizes. I'm not worried about those per se. Arc Duraludon was only about a 3% meta share towards the end of the format. Did it spike with the Umbreon? Yes. It kind of fell back down to where it was. If they're playing Drapions, Drapion is not a clear answer. What they're going to do is they're going to try to take 3 prizes. They usually don't have a follow-up, so our Path of the Peak at least shuts off that ability. We're playing enough Disruption where we're not afraid of Path, we're not afraid of their Drapion. If they have 2, it is what it is. If they play Spiritomb, it's going to hurt them anyway. So we deal with the Drapion. Spiritomb is there for later because we do play the Eiscue. I'm not too worried about Arceus decks at the moment. Obviously, if they're drawing the nuts and they've got the power from Arceus, that's a really hard comeback. So I'm not really worried about those. Quick pause. The 2 existing counters, Spiritomb and Drapion, are not enough to get you. They're more like deterrence or speed bumps. They are 100% speed bumps. So Spiritomb on the board. We've already proven that we can, at least a Sparkle, set up an Eiscue, bop it. Any decks, like an Arceus deck, doesn't always play recovery, so once it's gone, it's gone. It is what it is. You're looking on screen right now, we literally are going to deal with that Spiritomb right away. Drapion, they're going to time it, so you got to be careful. Don't feed them any early prizes. Drapion is there to clean up. Skystone has fallen out of favor for God knows why. I still think we're in a VMAX V-Star format, even with the EXs slowly emerging. Arceus is too good, Palkia is too good, Giratina is still too good. They really went, overboard, just kind of ramping the power on those cards. So you should be aware of that. So Skystone is just, it should see play, but it doesn't. All right, who do we got next? So we covered the Arceus, covered the Gardevoir, covered all our states, covered the Mirror. The Mirror is a coin flip battle. Next one I want to consider is Lost Zone Giratina. So that one made top 4. That one is a powerhouse, but it specifically hits certain numbers, so you have to feed your map accordingly. So Lost Impact is 280 guaranteed off the bat. I don't think they play Choice Belt. If they play Choice Belt, you do have to dance around that a little differently. They're also going to look for the Roxanne play, so thin your deck accordingly. Don't mind playing under Path of the Peak. I don't sit there and panic, go, oh my god, all I played was Path. Could be the worst, yes. Like, my current board state is scary, but I'm not overly concerned with it. Watch for the Roxanne. Try to keep their Giratinas off the board. They're going to have 1-star Requiem and 1 Lost Impact. Don't feed them a 1-prizer if help it, unless the 1-prizer helps you some way, some form. Like, I had to put Eiscue in this game on the board in order to get rid of the Spiritomb. Well, even making them burn it. Mew's always got it. Don't know what you're talking about. Mew's always got it. So they just don't expect that. Deal with the Giratinas, keep them off the board. That's your best way. Keep the Path Lock coming. It takes away their Radiant Greninja. It takes, if they do opt for a Lumineon or a Drapion or anything like that, it allows us to play a little safer. Wary of the Roxanne. If your deck is thin enough or you still have your Forest Stone, the stone is not necessary to be burned. If you notice that I'm not always quick to burn the Forest Seal Stone because it's a free grab anything. It's a get out of jail free card. And especially against cards like decks like this that are going to play very quickly. They're going to bob if they're going to really make life hard. Forest Stone just helps us later on. And I'm always slapping Iono because as a Lost Box player, as a Tina player, I know that you're usually going to be sitting on an extra Colress. So even if their hand looks dead, I'm banking on the fact that they Colressed and saw at least another Colress off it because that's just the nature of the deck. So we're going to Iono, put it away, and make them really dig for it. Pokegear is nice, but it's not always going to get you there. Sometimes they Colress into it, but again, not too worried about it. All right, transitioning over to the many faces of Lost Box. Okay, so this one is a very tough one. You do have to be very careful of how they want to go about it because they're going to try to use Cram-o-matic early to set up some damage. Path of the Peak shuts off some key abilities, whether it is Radiant Greninja, that is the most notable one. The Path of the Peak really shuts off because they're trying to build their hand, so their sequencing usually goes, they'll conceal cards, draw 2 cards, Comfey, flower selecting, maybe a second Comfey, flower selecting, then Colress. So by taking away 2 cards from them with the Radiant Greninja, you're forcing them into a tougher decision, so maybe they give up something they don't want. Funny fella decided to reestablish the Eiscue. Not a problem here. Not at all worried whatsoever because it's just, an easy KO. Which, look at that. We've always got it. It's a cheat code. We've always got it. The Radiant Greninja. In the early stage, it's just getting your KOs without putting yourself at mercy. Crystal Cave was in the deck. If you feel like you're going to play a lot of Lost Box, Crystal Cave and Penny and a second Switch Cart are always nice includes. Again, go back and forth with the count. Don't sit there and be like, oh, Brandon showed me how to play the deck on August 15th, 16th, or 17th, and, this is the deck that's going to stay. Metagames develop. You got to be wary of that. Sometimes you got to add more healing cards to deal with those damn Lost Box players. Lost Mine's a pain in the ass. Genesect, you know, is kind of like, yeah, he wants to soak a hit, but you'd rather put a Mew in the active to soak the hit because we can always Psychic Leap it off the board. So if you go first, try to end your board with a Mew. Be wary that they could knock it out with a Raikou or with a Dragonite. But typically you want to end it off with a Mew because we don't want to give them the Eiscue because that makes their prize map knock out a VMAX, knock out a Genesect, or hitting a Genesect means that they can just soften it up, save it for later, and work a little easier there. Because I do expect Drapion to make its way back into Lost Box decks. That's the big one. And then after they've started to take their prizes and get to 3, this is where the Ionos and the Judges and the extra copies really help. I find that I'm forcing them to... They're still going to draw cards. They're still going to Comfey. They're still going to Colress. But at this point, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Now I'm going to make you make some tough decisions. So you might have to flower selecting from 2 good cards you want. Now you can't conceal cards because we're playing a ton of Path. Oh, that card that you really, really wanted that was going to have me is at the bottom of your deck. Well, that certainly sucks. So good luck to you constantly rebuilding their hand. It's not a definitive path to victory, but with the Stage 2 decks and with the Lost Box decks, your biggest strategy in the deck is Path, Disruption, and Prey. And I don't mean like play stupidly while you're doing that, but the Disruption is usually enough to force your opponent into some sort of bricking circumstance that it can buy you a turn or 2 to race ahead, do Mew things, and then when they're in the game, you have a little bit of prize map flexibility. That way you can just push a little harder, and then by the time that they catch up to you, you're already racing ahead of them again. So Path, Disruption, and Prey. Sometimes the RNG gods are not with you, and it happens, but it is what it is. I don't think Lost Box is as favorable as you like to think. It is a 50-50 in the most sense, and I don't think that changes. Drapion, they'll try to skew a few percentage points, but they have to time it, they have to bump your path, they have to pull it out of their hand, and if we're constantly turning their hand to the bottom of the deck and taking it away, then it's going to be a very tough out for them. We do still want to go first. Keep in mind, we do want to go first in every single matchup, so that doesn't change with this one here either. We just will promote a Mew, and that way we can get rid of the damage later, unfortunately. Who else did I miss? So I feel like there's only a couple decks left I missed. Inteleon Urshifu, we're playing heavy path count. We are also playing Eiscue. Their only means of draw when the path of the peak is in play is the Octillery. Octillery has, what, 110 hit points, I do believe. So Block Slider on Eiscue, when there's 3 energy on the board, you can deal with the Remoraid's. Okay? It does put you at the mercy of them trying to Yoga Loop you later on, but if we keep the Remoraid's off the board with Path Lock, they can't bump them. They can't double gunner us. Urshifu is weak to us. They really don't want to play. Plus, we can also Melodious Echo turn 1, and we can take Inteleons off the board with the Path. The Judge, the Iono, they're going to play it too. It's kind of has to be a right meta call. I think Urshifu Inteleon has a lot of matchups that it struggles with to really see play. Typically, if we're throwing the Disruption in, it's a very combo-heavy deck. Sometimes they just don't have it, and they don't really have an answer for it, and that kind of sucks for them. It is also one of Urshifu Inteleon's worst matchups. Who else do we got here? So Lugia, I'm going to kind of group these bad boys together. Here's the thing. Lugia can beat itself before you even start. Their hands are still super susceptible. Did the Seniors Division win with a Path Lugia? I think we're still the more consistent deck under Path, so I'm not overly concerned. The colorless build dropped Tyranitar's, obviously. Might play a singular copy of Drapion. They might play Spiritomb. Again, the first little bit after Worlds, I expect to see a lot of Spiritomb, so we're already prepared for that. They're not going to be playing Manaphy, so the Spiritomb is just sitting on the bench as a free prize, so we can take it accordingly, or we can leave it out to keep their Luminions out of the play, so we don't really mind in that sense. And Fusion Strike Energy does ignore Spiritomb, so sometimes we just leave it on the board so they can't Luminion and grab it. Again, Lugia beats itself. Single Strike T-Tar, they're going to drop the Urshifu for the next little bit because Guardy and Mew are still very, very good. We haven't seen Duraludon in a bit either, so we'll see Yveltal, we will see Tyranitars. This one here, again, if they don't get the ideal setup and they're fighting under Path, they have to come up with a Path bump. They have to come up with a Disruption bump. We're typically trying to disrupt their hand. Awful, unplayable hand that they can't really come back from. That's it. That's the gist of it, is that if they can't come back from that hand, then we don't worry. Lugia might never get into the game. Never get into the game is fine for us. We're going to play. We're going to pop. Keep your Forest Stone. The Tyranitar with the energy, that one's going to be a little tough, because they'll probably knock out a VMAX, right? Because we're obviously punching with the VMAX. So in that one, we want to see if we can get away with responding with the Meloetta. So if we knock out something with the VMAX, and then they knock out the VMAX with the Tyranitar, then we try to knock out the Tyranitar with the Meloetta. and we just slap a path down. If we have to burn all 3 Power Tablets because there's only 2 Fusion Strike energy in play, by all means burn 3 freaking Power Tablets, because at the end of the game, then we're forcing them to really have it under path and really have the earn and really have this, and they still might not even have enough. Right, we're constantly saying, do you have enough? They just don't. Some games they really don't. They've got nothing. Miraidon, they like to operate under path. They're a very glass cannon heavy deck, so if they set up, then United Wings, they just hit us for weakness. So again, it's a 1 prize battle. It's not something we want to see. You really have to brick to lose a lot of these games. I did work in generalizations here. I understand that. More in-depth play is always nice. 5 ladder is tough to work through. Feel free to comment down below. Like, what do you want to see? What do you want to know? I can happily respond to any matchup. I'm very comfortable with the deck. I know for a fact Charizard is going to be a nightmare of a deck. 1 Charizard is just a mountain to climb, and you need all the stars aligned perfectly to deal with it. But the rest of the field, again, Chien Pao is very high rolly, Gardevoir is very high rolly. Lost Box, that one is a game of patience. Played against a few Lost Box players who never give me the 2 prizer. They don't want the Force Stone, so then they play a little slower, and then allows us to buy time there. Giratina one, again, you know Roxanne is coming, but if you start the path shenanigans, it hurts them too, because then they can't conceal cards and draw 2 extra cards, and then Judge and Iono. And Giratina can sometimes just see these unplayable brick hands. So if you enjoy the content and you want to see another breakdown and me ramble for 20-something minutes, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Congrats again, Vance, for winning with Mew. I think it's not going anywhere, and the only thing that will kill it is rotation. So until next time, guys, take care.